I gripped the steering wheel tighter as my truck skidded slightly on the ice. 9 hours of driving through this brutal snowstorm, but nothing would stop me from surprising Jessica on her 32nd birthday. The cake beside me was still perfect chocolate raspberry with vanilla buttercream, her favorite. After 3 months apart on this construction project, I was finally heading home. If you are watching this right now, let me know where you are from. And drop a like if you have ever gone to extreme lengths for someone you love. Jessica and I met during our sophomore year at the University of Michigan. I was studying architectural engineering, and she was pursuing a degree in marketing. We bumped into each other at the campus coffee shop, both reaching for the last blueberry muffin. I let her have it, and she offered to split it. That small moment of kindness blossomed into a 3-year relationship before I finally proposed on a boat cruise around Lake Michigan. The first 5 years of our marriage were genuinely happy. We complemented each other well, with my practical nature balancing her spontaneous spirit. We bought a modest house in the suburbs of Detroit, adopted a golden retriever named Tucker, and began planning for our future together. Dinner conversations were filled with laughter. Weekend trips to northern Michigan became our tradition, and our friends often commented on how perfectly matched we seemed. But over the last 2 years, something shifted. It was subtle at first, the kind of change you might not notice day to day. Jessica began spending more time on her phone, smiling at private jokes I was not part of. She joined a new gym, made new friends, and started going out more frequently without much explanation about where or with whom. Our conversations grew shorter, less intimate. Around the same time, Jessica became closer with her new sister-in-law, Amanda. My brother James had married Amanda about 3 years ago, and initially I was thrilled that Jessica had found a friend in the family. Amanda was outgoing, always planning social events and girls' nights. But something about her influence seemed to accelerate the changes in Jessica. After spending time with Amanda, Jessica would come home with subtle criticisms about our life together, our house, my career choices. "Louis, do you ever think about what our life could be like if we took more risks?" She would ask after a weekend with Amanda and James, who lived in a luxury condo downtown they could barely afford. I would remind her that we were saving for long-term goals, but my practical outlook increasingly seemed to disappoint her. My career had taken a significant turn about a year ago. After working as a project manager for a construction company for several years, I was offered a promotion to senior construction manager. It meant more money, better benefits, and a clearer path to the executive level. The only downside was the travel. Each new project would require me to be on site, sometimes for months at a time. The current project was in Fargo, North Dakota, overseeing the construction of a new medical center. 3 months away from home was difficult, but the substantially higher salary meant we could save faster for the lake house Jessica had always dreamed of owning. I transferred most of my earnings to our joint account, keeping only what I needed for basic expenses in my temporary apartment. We started with daily video calls, sharing details about our days and maintaining our connection despite the distance. But as weeks passed, those calls grew shorter. Jessica always had somewhere to be, something to do. When I would mention this, she would say I was being controlling, or that I did not understand how boring it was to talk about the same things every day. "You are the one who chose to take this job, Louis," she would remind me, when I expressed how much I missed her. "I am just trying to keep myself busy while you are gone." I began noticing changes in her social media too. New friends I had never met appeared in photos from restaurants and clubs I did not know she frequented. When I asked about these outings, her answers were vague. Just some work friends or people Amanda introduced me to. With my birthday alone in my sparse apartment and Thanksgiving on a video call, I became determined not to miss her birthday too. Jessica would be turning 32 next week, and I started planning how to surprise her. My boss was reluctant to approve time off in the middle of the project, but after explaining the situation and promising to handle coordination remotely, he granted me 3 days. I contacted Jessica's favorite bakery in Detroit and ordered her dream cake chocolate raspberry with vanilla buttercream decorated with sugar flowers in her favorite colors. I found a sapphire pendant that matched her eyes perfectly and had it gift wrapped with a card expressing how much she meant to me. The weather forecast showed a major snowstorm moving across the Midwest, directly in my path from Fargo to Detroit. My colleagues warned me not to attempt the drive. "Man, you can celebrate when you get back next month," said Tony, my assistant manager. "No birthday is worth risking your life in a blizzard." But I had already missed too many moments. This was my chance to show Jessica that despite the distance, she remained the center of my world. I assured everyone I would drive carefully and leave early to beat the worst of the storm. At 5 in the morning, I packed my truck with the gifts I had prepared and hit the road. The first few hours were manageable, just light snow and cold temperatures. I made good time across Minnesota, even stopping for coffee and sending Jessica a normal good morning text so she would not suspect anything. By the time I crossed into Wisconsin, conditions deteriorated rapidly. Visibility dropped to mere feet in front of my truck, and the roads became treacherous sheets of ice beneath fresh snow. About halfway through Wisconsin, I nearly collided with a jackknifed semi-truck swerving at the last moment and feeling my heart pound against my ribs as I narrowly avoided disaster. My phone battery drained quickly in the cold, and I stopped at a gas station to charge it and check in with Jessica. Our conversation was brief, but normal. She mentioned having a quiet night in with Amanda, ordering takeout and watching movies. I told her I was having dinner with colleagues, maintaining the ruse, while my chest ached with anticipation of surprising her. The final stretch through Michigan was the worst. What should have been a 3-hour drive took nearly 5, with white knuckles on the steering wheel and prayers under my breath at every slippery curve. But finally, around 8 in the evening, I turned onto our street, exhausted but triumphant. I parked my truck 2 houses down to preserve the surprise, then carefully gathered the cake box and gift bag. The snow was falling heavily, and I trudged through nearly a foot of it as I made my way to our front porch. The house looked warm, and inviting lights glowing in the kitchen at the back. Jessica's car was in the driveway, along with another I recognized as Amanda's red Audi. Perfect, I thought. Amanda was here just as Jessica had mentioned. I could surprise them both. Using my key, I quietly unlocked the front door, stepping inside and carefully closing it behind me without making a sound. I could hear female voices and laughter coming from the kitchen. I smiled, imagining their faces when I walked in with the cake and gift after driving through a blizzard to be there. As I approached the hallway leading to the kitchen, their conversation became clearer. I slowed, not wanting to burst in too suddenly and scare them. That is when I heard my name. "Has Lewis called tonight?" Amanda asked, the clink of wine glasses punctuating her question. Jessica sighed loudly. "Yes, for the 1,000th time this week. I swear, if he calls me one more time asking about my day in that needy voice, I might scream." My steps faltered. I stood frozen in the hallway, cake box growing heavy in my hands. Amanda laughed. "God, men are so clingy. James used to be like that too. You have trained him well, though he barely texts me when he travels now. I wish Lewis would learn. 3 months of peace is what I signed up for with this job, not daily interrogations about what I am doing and who I am with." Jessica replied. My stomach tightened. Each word felt like ice water down my spine. "Do you even miss him at all?" Amanda asked, her tone playful but pointed. There was a pause. I should have turned around then, walked out the door, and preserved what remained of my heart. But I stood rooted to the spot, needing to hear her answer. "Honestly, the money is nice. His constant check-ins are not," Jessica said flatly. "He is supposed to drive back next week in this weather." "That is a long drive in a snowstorm," Amanda noted. What Jessica said next shattered everything I thought I knew about our marriage. God, I hope he crashes. I could use the insurance money to finally renovate this place the way I want. The cake nearly slipped from my numb fingers. I tightened my grip, unable to process what I had just heard. Amanda laughed, not a shocked gasp, but an amused chuckle. Or at least a few months of silence while he recovers. That would be a nice birthday gift. They both burst into laughter, the sound cutting through me like broken glass. "Remember when he wanted to buy that lake cottage instead of the downtown condo?" Jessica continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "Always so practical and boring. Save for retirement, invest wisely, blah, blah, blah. And he sent you flowers for your anniversary when he was gone last year, Amanda added. Flowers James got me a weekend at the spa and a designer handbag. Lewis thinks small, Jessica agreed. Always has. Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I had married someone with actual ambition. Someone like Derek, Amanda asked suggestively. There was a pause, and I could imagine Jessica smiling. Derek understands the finer things, and he definitely does not call every day to check in. My world collapsed around me. Derek was her coworker. Someone she had mentioned casually a few times. Just a friend, she had said. Nothing to worry about. I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and walked into the kitchen. Jessica and Amanda sat at the island counter, wine glasses in hand, an open bottle between them. Jessica wore the blue dress I had given her last Christmas. Her hair was styled perfectly, makeup flawless, even for a simple night in. Their laughter died instantly when they saw me. Jessica's face drained of color, her eyes widening in shock and horror. Amanda froze, mid-sip, wine glass suspended near her lips. Without a word, I placed the cake box gently on the counter. I set the small jewelry box beside it. Neither woman spoke. Neither moved. Jessica finally broke the silence, her voice, a strangled whisper. Lewis. What are you doing here? I looked at her, at the woman I had driven 9 hours through a blizzard for the woman who had just wished for my death. I said nothing, turned, and walked back toward the front door. Lewis. Wait. Jessica called, recovering from her shock and rushing after me. It was just stupid talk. We were just joking around. I reached the front door as she grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with panic. Please, you have to believe me. I did not mean any of that. We were just being silly after too much wine. I looked at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. I drove 9 hours through a snowstorm to surprise you for your birthday. I nearly died twice on those roads. And I heard exactly what you think of me. Her grip tightened. Lewis, please. You know I love you. We can talk about this. Amanda appeared in the hallway behind her, face pale. Lewis, we were just being stupid. You know how girls talk. It does not mean anything. I gently removed Jessica's hand from my arm. Happy birthday, Jessica, I said quietly, and walked out into the swirling snow. She followed me to the driveway barefoot in the snow, calling my name as I got into my truck. I drove away, her diminishing figure in my rearview mirror, arms wrapped around herself in the cold mouth, open in protest or explanation. I did not care which. I checked into a Holiday Inn, about 10 miles away, numb and moving on autopilot. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and began reviewing our recent history with new clarity. I scrolled through our text messages, noting how her responses had grown shorter, less affectionate. I checked our joint bank account and noticed withdrawals I had not paid attention to before, sums that seemed excessive for normal household expenses. On a hunch, I looked at her social media accounts. There were check-ins at upscale restaurants. I had never heard of photos with groups of stylish strangers and several pictures with a tall, dark-haired man, always positioned just a little too close to my wife. The captions never mentioned his name, but I knew it must be Derek. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from Jessica. They ranged from desperate apologies to angry accusations. You were not supposed to be here. You violated my privacy by eavesdropping. Please come home so we can talk about this. I was just blowing off steam. If you ever loved me, you will give me a chance to explain. I silenced the notifications and called my best friend Ryan, who answered despite the late hour. You knew, did not you? I asked after explaining what had happened. There was a long pause. I suspected, Ryan admitted. The few times I saw her while you were gone, she seemed different, too happy about your absence, if that makes sense. I did not want to say anything without proof. Well, now I have proof, I said bitterly. What will you do? I watched the snow falling outside my hotel window. I am not going back. Not tonight, maybe not ever. I blocked Jessica's number, and Amanda's too, when she began sending messages claiming they were just joking around. I turned off notifications from social media as mutual friends began asking questions. I sent a brief text to my parents, explaining I needed some space and would call them soon. Sleep did not come that night. I lay awake, replaying Jessica's words, each repetition cutting deeper than the last. The next morning, I waited until 9:30, when I knew Jessica would be at work. I drove back to our house and used my key one last time. Our dog Tucker greeted me with enthusiastic joy, the only welcome I could count on in this house. I patted his head and filled his food bowl before heading upstairs. I packed efficiently, taking only what I truly needed. Clothes, important documents, a few sentimental items from my parents and grandparents. I left behind the furniture, electronics, and other shared possessions. In our bedroom, I placed my wedding ring on the dresser with a brief note. I heard everything. Do not contact me. I contacted my boss, explained a family emergency, and asked about the possibility of working remotely on the project. He was understanding and agreed to arrange it, expressing concern about my well-being. I transferred exactly half of our joint accounts to a new account in my name, only leaving the rest for Jessica. Fair, but no more than fair. Tucker whined as I loaded my truck, sensing something was wrong. I had arranged for my parents to pick him up later that day. Unable to take him with me immediately, but unwilling to leave him alone with Jessica, who had never shown much interest in caring for him. By noon, I was on the road again. This time heading to Chicago, where my college friend Thomas lived. The snowstorm had passed, leaving behind clear skies and clean roads, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I drove mechanically, barely registering the miles passing beneath my wheels. Thomas welcomed me without questions when I arrived that evening, offering his spare room for as long as I needed it. Only after I had showered and eaten did he ask what happened. My marriage ended last night, I said simply, then told him the whole story. Thomas winced at the brutality of Jessica's words. Man, that is ice cold. No one deserves to hear that, especially after what you did to get there. The worst part is I never saw it coming, I admitted. I knew things were strained with the distance, but I thought we were solid underneath it all. What is your plan? He asked. Work remotely. Figure out next steps. I need some time to process everything. Thomas nodded. Stay as long as you need. The spare room is yours. In the days that followed, I established a new routine. My company approved remote work, and I set up a makeshift office in Thomas's dining room. I found a therapist who could see me twice weekly, recognizing that I needed professional help to process this betrayal. I went for long runs along Lake Michigan, pushing my body to exhaustion to quiet my mind. Meanwhile, Jessica's attempts to reach me escalated. She created new email addresses when I blocked her primary one. She called from unknown numbers. She posted increasingly desperate messages on social media, crafting a narrative where she was the victim of a misunderstanding. My husband disappeared after overhearing a stupid joke. Please help me find him and bring him home. I watched it all from a distance, creating a separate account to monitor without engaging. I saw how the story spread among our friends and family, how sides were being chosen. Most people reserved judgment, waiting to hear both sides. A few, mainly Amanda's friends, supported Jessica unconditionally. Others who knew me better expressed doubts about her version. Jessica's carefully constructed image began crumbling under scrutiny. Colleagues who had witnessed her behavior while I was away shared their observations with mutual friends. Her own sister called me directly, apologizing for not warning me about changes she had noticed in Jessica. She started spending a lot of time with someone from work, her sister Natalie confessed. I tried to talk to her about it, but she shut me down completely. Even Jessica's parents reached out their message, reflecting genuine shock at their daughter's behavior. They had always treated me like a son, and their disappointment in Jessica was evident. We raised her better than this, her father said. Whatever you decide to do, Louis, know that we understand and support you. Their support meant more than I could express, a reminder that family could transcend blood ties. In Chicago, I began rebuilding. Thomas introduced me to his friends, and I found myself welcomed into a new social circle. People who knew nothing about my marriage or its dramatic end, who accepted me for who I was now. I reconnected with old college friends in the area, finding comfort in those long-standing connections. Most importantly, I reconnected with myself, the man I was before becoming half of a couple, before bending and compromising to accommodate Jessica's growing demands. In therapy, I examined patterns. I had ignored red flags I had dismissed out of love or loyalty. I worked through my anger, channeling it into productive change rather than bitterness. I remembered my own dreams, ones I had set aside, when they did not align with Jessica's vision for our life. Simple things like hiking the Appalachian Trail, learning woodworking, volunteering with habitat restoration projects. I began exploring those interests, finding pieces of myself I had forgotten. Exactly 3 weeks after I walked out of our house, I received an email from Jessica that was different from her previous attempts. The subject line simply read, "When you are ready to read this." Unlike her other messages, this one contained no excuses, no attempts to minimize what she had done. Instead, it was a full, unequivocal acknowledgement of her cruelty and betrayal. "What I said that night was unforgivable," she wrote. "It revealed the worst version of myself, the person I had been allowing myself to become. There is no explanation that can justify wishing harm to someone who loves you, especially someone who would drive through a snowstorm to celebrate your birthday." She detailed the steps she had taken since my departure, entering individual therapy, cutting ties with negative influences, including Amanda, taking accountability with family and friends, rather than seeking sympathy. "I do not expect forgiveness," her email continued. "I do not even expect a response. But I need you to know that losing you has forced me to confront who I was becoming, and I am committed to change regardless of what happens between us." She ended with a simple request for one phone conversation, when and if I ever felt ready. No pressure, no deadline. I read the email several times over the next few days, discussing it with my therapist during our sessions. What struck me was the absence of any request to reconcile. No promises of a better future together, just accountability for her actions and respect for my boundaries. After careful consideration, I responded with an agreement to a single phone call, setting clear parameters. 30 minutes at a specific time, with the understanding that this was not a promise of reconciliation, but a step toward personal closure. When I answered her call at the appointed time, the first thing I noticed was the absence of tears or drama in her voice. She sounded calm, subdued even. "Thank you for taking my call," she began. "I know you did not have to." "I appreciate that," I replied, surprised by my own composure. "I read your email. It seemed sincere." "It was," she affirmed. "Louis, what I said that night, what you overheard, it was the lowest moment of my life. I cannot take back those words or erase the pain they caused you." "No, you cannot," I agreed. "What I need to understand is where those words came from. Were they a momentary cruelty, or do they reflect how you truly feel about me, about our marriage?" Jessica took a deep breath. They came from a place of profound selfishness and ingratitude. I let myself be influenced by people who measure success by material things, by status. I began seeing your practicality and responsibility as limitations rather than strengths. We talked about the changes in her behavior, her growing resentment of my calls and attempts to stay connected during our separation. She admitted to an emotional connection with Derek, though she insisted it had not become physical. "That is a distinction without much difference," I pointed out. "You are right," she acknowledged. "Betrayal is betrayal, whether physical or emotional." I explained how her words had shattered not just my trust, but my entire understanding of our relationship. I keep asking myself if anything was real, or if I was just convenient, just a provider. You were never just anything, Louis. You were everything, and I lost sight of that. I cannot blame Amanda or anyone else. I made choices, terrible ones. By the end of our call, I felt something I had not expected. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a certain clarity. Jessica had changed, or at least had begun the process of change. The question was whether that change had come too late for us. "I need more time," I told her. "I am not ready to make any decisions about our future." "I understand," she replied. "I am focusing on becoming someone worthy of trust again, regardless of what happens between us." We agreed to meet once in person, in a public place, to continue the conversation. A week later, I sat in a coffee shop in downtown Chicago, watching the door for her arrival. Jessica looked different when she walked in. Not just physically, though, she had abandoned the highlighted hair and designer clothes that had become her uniform in recent months. There was something fundamentally changed in her demeanor, a humility that had been absent before. She sat across from me, hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "Thank you for meeting me." We talked for 2 hours more honestly than we had in years. She explained how she had gradually lost herself in comparison and competition using social media and Amanda's influence as benchmarks for success. I shared how her changed behavior had affected me, how I had sensed something wrong, but blamed myself for not being present enough. "I would like us to try counseling," she suggested tentatively. "Not with any guarantee of getting back together, but to understand what happened and to find healthy closure, whatever that looks like." I considered her request. "I can agree to counseling," I said finally, "but I am not moving back. Not now. Possibly not ever." She nodded, accepting my boundary without protest. "I understand. I am just grateful for any chance to make amends." Over the following weeks, we attended weekly therapy sessions with a couples counselor specializing in betrayal trauma. The therapist helped us excavate deeper issues that had contributed to our breakdown: Jessica's insecurity and need for external validation, my tendency to retreat into work rather than addressing problems directly. Gradually, painfully, we rebuilt a form of communication based on honesty rather than expectation. Jessica continued her individual therapy, making visible changes in her life. She distanced herself from toxic friendships, including ending her relationship with Amanda completely. She scaled back her social media presence, focusing on real connections rather than curated impressions. I remained in Chicago, extending my stay with Thomas while continuing remote work. The distance provided perspective, allowing me to see our relationship from outside the emotional fog of daily interaction. I reconnected with interests and friendships I had neglected, rebuilding my identity separate from being Jessica's husband. 2 months after that snowy night, I agreed to return home for a trial period. Not moving back completely, but testing whether the changes we had both made could translate into a new, healthier relationship. Our reunion was cautious, tentative. We established clear boundaries and expectations. Complete transparency about friendships and activities. Joint and individual therapy continuing indefinitely. Regular check-ins about feelings and concerns with a commitment to addressing issues immediately rather than letting them fester. Jessica had transformed our spare bedroom into an office for me, a space of my own within the shared home. She had removed many of the status symbols that had become important to her, simplifying our living space. Most importantly, she had adopted Tucker from my parents, developing the bond with him she had previously neglected. "He helped me understand what really matters," she explained, as Tucker leaned against her leg contentedly. "Unconditional love is not about what someone provides. It is about who they are at their core." Our progress was not linear. There were setbacks, arguments, moments of doubt. The memory of that night, of her cruel words and callous laughter, would sometimes hit me anew, reopening wounds I thought had begun to heal. In those moments, I would question whether reconciliation was possible or even desirable. But there were also moments of genuine connection, of the simple joy we had once found in each other's company. Cooking dinner together, walking Tucker in the park, discussing books or films, without the undercurrent of comparison or competition that had poisoned our interactions before. 1 year after the snowstorm incident, we sat together on our porch swing, watching the first snow of the season begin to fall. "What are you thinking?" Jessica asked, her hand tentatively finding mine. "I am thinking about how different things might have been," I admitted. "If I had arrived 10 minutes later, or if the storm had delayed me another day, I might never have known how you really felt." She nodded, accepting this hard truth. "And I might never have confronted what I was becoming." Sometimes the most painful moments are the ones that save us from ourselves. I looked at the woman beside me, so familiar, yet so changed. The most important lesson I learned through all of this is that self-respect has to come first. Walking away that night was the hardest thing I have ever done, but it was also the most necessary and the most powerful, Jessica added softly. It forced me to face myself without excuses or deflections. You taught me that real love requires honesty and respect, not just when it is easy, but especially when it is difficult. The snow continued to fall around us, covering the world in clean, forgiving white. Not erasing the past, but creating a new surface on which to build a future, should we choose to do so together. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved to maintain your self-respect? The hardest decisions often lead to the most profound growth. Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, true relationships are built on mutual respect and honesty, not convenience or comfort.